All right, moving on. We now move to items 10.1, which are public hearings. First public hearing is matters relating to city user fees. I'll open the public hearing and ask Janet Coster to come forward, please.
It's all hubbub about.
Good evening, Mayor Batchelor, members of the council. We're bringing back an item that was discussed last year by the previous council, so I'm going to give a brief history to help refresh everyone's memory on our prior discussions on this matter. We are discussing fees tonight from a number of departments: planning department, building, engineering, finance, police, and city clerk. I'm going to use the term user fees. We discussed it at 3 meetings in 2008, including a public hearing on September 23rd. At that time, we did take public comment, and staff got direction from the council. I'm going to summarize the comments from that night. The council did direct staff to work with local business groups to comprise a committee with representatives from the Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Business Association, and the North Adams Street Business Association to get comments on the fees that were proposed. There were concerns raised at the public hearing about the percent increase in the fees. Many of these fees have not been increased in 14 years or more, so the proposed increases were significant. We also heard comments that, this is a tough economic times of all times to raise fees. This is, one of the toughest times to do it, particularly for small businesses, where every dollar counts. A fee increase could make the difference between a business that's viable or not. We also heard some comments that there were certain tasks that should be able to be approved at the front counter, and people didn't understand why it would be so expensive to process some applications. And we had a discussion about how different cities have a different approach in terms of what approvals are either required at the Planning Commission level or are designated to staff. And in Dixon's case, most of our approvals, particularly with the planning fees, do have to go to the Planning Commission. And one of the options is, would we like to delegate more approval authority to staff? So those were some of the concepts that we took back to our committee. And the committee was comprised of Gary Archer from Archer Ficklin Realty, Mr. Dave Scholl from the Independent Voice and Heavenly Gifts, and Jack Caldwell from California Water Service. I'm going to briefly touch on the study that happened before, again, just to try to set the stage a little bit for where we started our discussion. We had a study prepared by a consultant. They looked at, again, a number of city services, the time involved to, say, prepare a conditional use permit to be reviewed by the Planning Commission, or for the engineering staff to review a final map or improvement plans, and then looked at what the cost of providing that service was, and then the fees we generate from those fees. So that study found that overall, looking at these departments, that the cost of providing the services exceeded the fees received by $400,000. And the biggest discrepancies, again, between cost of service versus the revenue collected were in the planning department. That's more than half of the discrepancy, roughly a quarter in the engineering department, and then smaller amounts in building and city clerk and finance department. With regards to the building department, we believe we've sort of rectified most of that discrepancy last January, or about a year ago. That council adopted an update in the building code, and what that did, it included a new valuation formula, and most building permit fees are based on the value of the work done. So with that, we believe we closed the gap on that item. So although we have a few items here with regards to building, that's no longer the prime focus here tonight. So that was sort of, the initial findings of that study. We came forward with a fee schedule and heard the comments that I summarized for you. The committee had a number of recommendations, and here we are summarized. And we do have a few of the committee members here tonight, so you may want to ask them for their comments. But in general, again, most of the focus was on the planning department fees. We provided more tiers, meaning instead of having one flat fee for a conditional use permit, we looked at small projects, $20,000 or less, medium-sized projects and large projects, and had smaller fees, medium fees, and larger, again, based on the size of the project. So again, that was partly in response to some of the public comments that we heard. And again, a smaller project should have fewer impacts and concerns and less time required to process that. So that's what you see proposed in the fee schedule. There's also, in some cases, a suggested fee difference for infill projects or existing buildings. A couple thoughts there. Again, you're encouraging revitalization of the downtown area, areas that might be blighted or buildings that have been vacant for a long time. You're encouraging people to use existing structures. It is also consistent with the general plan that talks about preserving private farmland. This is actually something that's we're hearing more and more from the state level, both in looking at our housing element and other general plan concepts. The concept of encouraging infill, whether through reduced fees or other types of incentives, so that you're not developing in more of a sprawl type fashion. And this is one of the ways to help, again, a little more compact development, and this fee structure reflects that. We also did look at the issue of how we process some of our development applications, and we worked with the committee and also with Community Development Director Dowswell for opportunities on where we might make some changes. There's sort of four main areas of proposed changes. The first one we'd like to look at is the issue of conditional use permits. And that's basically where a business, if it's not within a specific list of approved uses in an area, they have to go through a process before the Planning Commission, and they have the opportunity to put a number of conditions on a project. If we review that list and if we find that maybe some business types shouldn't require a conditional use permit, again, that fee goes away. So best possible world is maybe there's a fee that someone doesn't have to pay anymore. We're not asking the council to make that decision tonight. What we're asking is just direction to say, are these types of things, again, something you want staff to pursue? We'll work with the Planning Commission. We'll come together with a specific proposal, and then that would come back in the form of an ordinance. The zoning ordinance requires changes. So again, we're just looking for a general direction from council on these types of things if you'd like us to move forward. Some of the other opportunities or areas for variances that perhaps some of those can be delegated to staff. Again, a little more efficient if we don't have to go through the board process, and just trying to save a little time and money, again, if we make some procedural changes there. Maybe in design review, some opportunities for, again, delegating approvals to staff. And then at the tentative map and final map, that's probably the last one we would bring forward, and we'd want to look with the city attorney into that one a little more detailed about the number of approvals required. Some agencies have fewer steps than Dixon does, and there might be an opportunity there. We did also spend some time on the issue of public records. That is something that's had public interest for quite some time. And we came to an agreement on some fee proposals, and also just in general some ideas that the committee would like to see implemented in the future. We'd like to really get the city code online. That's a document that we feel it's important to get online. And also look at opportunities for making it easier for the public to make their own copies, rather than having to come in and have city staff make copies. Could you have an extra copy or available, and maybe kind of like a Kinko's type setup? You have a little item that you put into the copy, or tracks how many copies you make, and you make your own copies. So budgets being tight, we'd have to look for opportunities as extra equipment becomes available, but those are opportunities there for help making Dixon a little more friendly in terms of giving the public access to some of our records.